There was nothing unusual about that day, or at least that's what I thought. The sun was shining softly, but inside me, everything felt heavy. For months, I had been living with a strange feeling, like I was walking through fog, moving forward but never really knowing where I was going. That morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. I wasn't chasing productivity, I was chasing silence, a few moments alone with my thoughts. But I didn't know that this would be the day my life would quietly begin to change. Around mid-morning, the receptionist walked toward me with a small envelope in her hand. She smiled politely and said, "There's a letter for you, but it doesn't have a sender's name." My heart skipped. I wasn't expecting any letter, and there was no one I knew who would write to me without saying who they were. I sat down slowly, holding the envelope. My hands felt colder than usual, as if my body already sensed that something inside it carried weight. Before opening it, I paused. There was a strange feeling in my chest, like truth was knocking gently on the door of my life. I finally opened it. The very first line stole the calm I thought I had. "You may not remember me, but your life was once changed by a lie." My body went still. I hadn't even read the rest, but somehow I knew nothing would feel the same after this. I couldn't focus on work anymore. My mind was filled with questions. Who wrote this? What lie? And why now? That night, I went home with a letter in my pocket and a storm in my mind. Sleep never came. The words kept replaying over and over again. But one sentence echoed louder than all the others. "If you want the truth, come to the place where we last met." The problem was, I didn't remember any such place. I knew that if I went looking for that place, I might lose more than I was ready to lose. But I also knew I couldn't keep living without knowing the truth. If you were in my place, would you go looking for answers, or would you let the past stay buried? That night felt longer than any night I had ever lived. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the letter resting on my chest as if it had weight far beyond paper. Every word echoed in my mind, mixing curiosity with a quiet fear I couldn't explain. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to ignore it. Some truths may shake you, but the absence of truth slowly breaks you. So I began searching. I reread the letter carefully, this time paying attention to every small detail, the handwriting, the tone, even the way certain words were underlined as if they carried hidden meaning. One phrase stood out: "Where we last met." Those 4 words felt like a locked door inside my memory. I knew the key had to be somewhere in my past. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I started revisiting my own history. Old photos, old messages, places I used to go but had forgotten. At first, nothing made sense. It felt like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But then, something small shifted. While scrolling through old pictures on my phone, I stopped at one I didn't even remember taking. It was blurry, taken at sunset. There was a bench, and behind it, a quiet park I hadn't visited in years. The moment I saw it, my chest tightened. Not because I fully remembered, but because I felt something, a distant emotion trying to surface. That was when I knew. That place wasn't just a park, it was a chapter of my life I had somehow closed without realizing it. That afternoon, I went there. Every step felt heavier, as if I was walking toward a version of myself I had left behind. The park looked smaller than I remembered, but the silence felt the same, peaceful yet strangely intense. I found the bench. I stood there for a long moment, just looking at it, waiting, not for someone to appear, but for my memory to speak. And then it happened. A flash of the past, a conversation I couldn't quite hear, a feeling of confusion and sadness. I sat down slowly, and for the first time, I whispered to myself, something happened here, something important. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't just about discovering who wrote the letter. This was about discovering a part of myself I had lost. And suddenly, the fear I felt before started turning into determination, because deep down, I knew I was closer to the truth than I had ever been. If this story is making you curious about what really happened, take a second to subscribe and join me on this journey, because the next part is where things begin to change in ways I never expected. As I sat on that bench, trying to piece together fragments of memory, I heard footsteps approaching from behind. Slow, careful. I turned around, and the moment I saw who it was, I realized this story was far bigger than I imagined. The footsteps stopped just a few steps behind me. I didn't turn immediately. For a brief second, I just sat there, feeling my heartbeat rise, as if my body already knew what my mind was still trying to understand. Then I slowly turned around, and there they were. A face that felt strangely familiar, but distant at the same time, like a dream you wake up from but can't fully recall. They looked at me the way someone looks at a place they once called home, with warmth but also with hesitation. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavy, not uncomfortable, but full, like it carried years of words that had never been said. Finally, they broke it. "I didn't know if you would come." Their voice was calm, but there was a softness in it, almost fragile. I swallowed, trying to find the right words, but nothing felt right. "Do I know you?" I asked quietly. They smiled, not a happy smile, but the kind that comes with memories that still hurt. "You did." We sat on the bench together, the space between us filled with tension and curiosity. I kept studying their face, searching for something. A memory, a moment, a connection, but my mind felt like a locked room. "You sent the letter?" I asked. They nodded slowly, and then they said something that made my chest tighten. "I've been trying to tell you the truth for a long time." The truth, that word again. It felt like a thread pulling me deeper into something I wasn't ready to fully see. "What truth?" They looked down at their hands before answering. "About what happened the last time we were here." I glanced around the park, suddenly aware of how quiet it was, like the world itself was waiting for the next words. As they spoke, fragments began to flicker in my mind. Not clear images, just emotions. Confusion, hurt, a sense of leaving without understanding why. "I remember feeling lost," I said slowly, "but I don't remember why." They nodded, as if that confirmed something they already knew. "You left that day without knowing the full story." My heart began to beat faster. "Then tell me now," I said. But instead of speaking immediately, they took a deep breath, as if the next words carried years of weight. "Before I do, you need to know something. The truth won't just answer your questions. It might change how you see your entire past." For a moment, I hesitated, not because I didn't want to know, but because I suddenly realized how much knowing could change. What if the truth made everything I believed about my life feel uncertain? What if it opened wounds I didn't even know existed? But then I remembered all the nights I had spent feeling like something was missing, and I knew I couldn't turn back now. "I'm ready," even though a part of me wasn't sure. If you've ever felt like there was a missing piece in your story, this journey might feel close to home. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because this is the moment where everything begins to unravel. They finally looked straight into my eyes, and with a voice barely above a whisper, they said, "The day you walked away from here, you didn't just leave a conversation behind. You left a truth someone chose to hide from you." A cold wave ran through me. What truth? Their lips parted, ready to answer, but just as they were about to speak, their phone rang. They quickly silenced it, but the moment had already changed. "Is something wrong?" I asked. They hesitated. "Yes, it's just that once I tell you this, there's no going back." The wind moved softly through the trees, and I realized my life was standing at the edge of a revelation. I didn't know if I was about to find peace or open a door I could never close again. But one thing was certain: the truth was closer than ever. The air between us felt heavier than before, like the world itself had slowed down to listen. They looked at me for a long moment, searching my face as if trying to decide whether I was truly ready. I could feel it. Whatever they were about to say had lived inside them for years. Finally, they spoke. "That day you came here because you came looking for answers." My chest tightened. That sentence felt like a key turning slowly inside a door in my mind. "I did?" They nodded. "You knew something wasn't right. You could feel it, even though no one had told you anything yet." A strange pressure built behind my eyes, as if a memory was trying to push its way back into the light. "You asked questions that day," continued they. "Questions that made someone very uncomfortable." "Who?" I asked, my voice almost a whisper. They hesitated, and then they said, "Someone you trusted." The words landed slowly, but their weight was immediate. Someone I trusted. My mind began racing through faces, through moments, through years of memories, trying to find where this hidden crack might have started. What did they hide from me? They took a deep breath. They hid the truth about why you walked away from a part of your life, a truth that would have changed everything if you had known it back then. I felt it before I understood it, a deep sadness rising from somewhere I couldn't fully reach, like my heart recognized the truth before my mind did. "I remember feeling betrayed," I said slowly, "but I don't remember why." Their eyes softened. "Because you were never told the full story." A silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of years, years of misunderstanding, of questions that never found answers. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" They looked away briefly, then back at me. "Because the truth would have forced someone to face what they did, and they weren't ready to lose you." My breath caught. Lose me? So they chose silence instead. The realization hit slowly, but deeply. Sometimes people don't hide the truth to protect you. Sometimes they hide it to protect themselves. If this story is making you feel something, take a moment to subscribe and stay with me until the end, because the next part is where the hidden truth finally starts to take shape. I looked at them, my voice unsteady. "So tell me now." Their answer came softly, "Because living with the truth alone became heavier than the fear of losing you." Those words lingered in the air, carrying both relief and regret. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just my story, it was theirs too, and whatever happened back then had changed both of us in ways we were only beginning to understand. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the park, like the past was casting shadows across my present. I knew the biggest revelation was still ahead, because even though I now understood that a truth had been hidden, I still didn't know what that truth actually was. And deep down, I could feel it. The moment I finally heard it, nothing in my life would ever look the same again. The sun had almost disappeared behind the trees, leaving the park wrapped in a quiet golden light. It felt like the world was giving us a moment, one last breath before everything changed. I looked at them, my heart beating louder than my thoughts. "This is the moment, isn't it?" I said softly. They nodded, and for a second I saw something in their eyes, not just sadness, but relief. as if carrying this truth alone had been a silent burden for too long. That day, they started, you came here because you had discovered something that didn't make sense. My chest tightened again. What did I discover? They exhaled slowly. You discovered that a decision that changed your life wasn't entirely yours. I froze. The words didn't just surprise me, they unsettled something deep inside. What do you mean? They looked straight into my eyes. You were led to believe something that wasn't true. And suddenly, something shifted. Not a full memory, but a sensation. A moment of doubt, a conversation that felt incomplete, a choice that never fully felt like mine. I remember feeling pressured, I whispered slowly, like I had to decide quickly, but I didn't know why. They nodded gently, because you didn't have all the facts. A chill ran through me. All those years, all the times I wondered if I had made the wrong decision, what if it was never truly my decision to begin with? I swallowed hard. Who did it? For a moment, they didn't answer. The silence stretched, heavy and fragile. I could tell the next words would change something permanently. Finally, they spoke. Someone you loved deeply. My heart dropped. Not just surprise. Not just surprise. Pain. Because suddenly my mind knew exactly where to look. And even before they said the name, I felt the truth coming closer. If your heart is racing right now, you're not alone. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the moment where everything is finally revealed, because the next part is the one that changes the entire story. I felt my hands tremble slightly. Tell me, I said, barely above a whisper. They opened their mouth to speak, and at that exact moment, a strong wind passed through the park, rustling the leaves around us. It felt symbolic, almost unreal, like nature itself knew what was about to happen. They leaned closer, their voice quiet but steady. Before I say it, you need to know something. I held my breath. The truth isn't just about what happened. It's about why it happened. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Knowing who did it would hurt, but understanding why might hurt even more. The past wasn't just waiting to be remembered. It was waiting to be understood. And I knew. The next words I was about to hear would change how I saw my entire life. The world felt unusually still. Even the sound of the wind seemed to fade, as if everything around us understood that this moment mattered. I could hear my heartbeat, slow, heavy, expectant. They looked at me with eyes that carried both apology and courage. And then finally, they said it. It was them. The name left their lips softly, but inside me it echoed like thunder. For a second, I couldn't breathe, not because I didn't understand, but because I understood too well. I didn't need to ask how. I didn't need to ask when. The moment I heard that name, memories began rearranging themselves inside my mind. Conversations that once felt normal suddenly felt incomplete. Moments that felt loving now carried a shadow of doubt. It wasn't just shock. It was the realization that a part of my life had been built on something I never fully saw. I trusted them, I whispered. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. They nodded slowly. And that's exactly why it worked. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself. Why would they do that? The question felt heavier than the truth itself. They took a deep breath before answering. Because they were afraid. I opened my eyes. Afraid of what? They looked straight at me, their voice calm but full of emotion. Afraid of losing you. The words hit differently than I expected. Not anger, not betrayal, just a deep, complicated sadness. They believed, they continued, that if you knew the full truth back then, you would have chosen a path that didn't include them. My chest tightened. So it wasn't just manipulation, it was fear disguised as protection. But fear can still change lives. They convinced themselves it was the right thing, they said softly, that they were protecting both of you from a painful outcome. I looked down at my hands, realizing how strange life can be. Sometimes the people who hurt us don't do it out of hate, but out of their own inability to face losing us. Inside me, emotions collided. Hurt, understanding, confusion, and an unexpected sense of compassion I wasn't ready to feel. Because knowing the reason didn't erase the impact. Years of doubt, years of wondering if I had made the wrong choices, all because I never had the full picture. If you've ever discovered a truth that changed how you see your past, subscribe and stay with me, because the next part is where I have to face the person behind it all, and that's where the hardest decision begins. I looked back at them, my voice steadier now. So what happens now? They didn't answer immediately. Instead, they gave me a look that felt both supportive and uncertain. Now, you decide what this truth means for your future. That was the moment I realized something important. The past explains us, but it doesn't control what we choose next. Still, knowing the truth is one thing, facing the person behind it is another. And deep down, I knew that moment was coming. Soon. As I stood up from the bench, I felt different. Not lighter, but clearer. The mystery was no longer hidden, but the real challenge had just begun. Because the next step wasn't about discovering the truth, it was about confronting it, and I didn't know if I was ready for what that conversation would bring. I didn't sleep that night, not because I didn't try, but because my mind refused to rest. The truth kept replaying itself, not like a loud storm, but like a quiet echo that wouldn't fade. Every memory felt different now. Every moment from the past carried a new meaning, and one realization became impossible to ignore. I couldn't move forward without facing them. The next day felt heavier than usual, not physically, but emotionally, like I was carrying years of unanswered questions with every step. I kept asking myself the same thing. What do you say to someone who changed your life without you knowing? Do you start with anger, with questions, with silence? I didn't have the answer, but I knew I had to show up. When I finally stood in front of them, time felt strange, like the present and the past were existing in the same space. They looked at me with the same familiar eyes, but now I could see something I hadn't noticed before. Guilt. Not loud or dramatic, just quiet, like something they had been carrying for a very long time. For a moment, neither of us spoke, because sometimes silence says everything words are afraid to. I know, I said softly. That was all. No accusations, no explanations. Just two words that held years of hidden truth. Their expression changed instantly. Not shock, but the kind of relief that comes when a secret finally steps into the light. I always wondered when this day would come, they said quietly. Their voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with emotion. We talked, not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. They told me how fear had shaped their choices, how they convinced themselves it was the only way to keep me close, how every year that passed made the truth harder to say. And I listened, because understanding doesn't always mean agreeing, but it gives you clarity, and clarity is what I had been searching for all along. If you've been on this journey with me, subscribe now, because the next part isn't just the ending, it's the decision that defines everything. When the conversation slowed, they looked at me with eyes full of uncertainty. Can you ever forgive me? The question hung in the air, fragile and heavy at the same time. And I realized something. Forgiveness isn't a single moment. It's a process, a choice you grow into, not one you force. I don't have the full answer yet, I said honestly, but I'm no longer running from the truth. Their eyes filled with emotion, not because everything was fixed, but because something had finally begun to heal. As I walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt since this journey started. Not closure, not relief, but peace with the fact that the past no longer controlled me. Still, one final question remained. What would I choose to do with everything I now knew? Because the truth doesn't just reveal who hurt you, it reveals who you want to become next. Standing alone later that evening, I realized the story was no longer about what happened years ago. It was about the decision I was about to make. And I knew. Whatever I chose would define the ending of this chapter, not just for them, but for me. The night was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels empty, but the kind that feels like a pause, as if life itself was giving me space to breathe. I sat alone, replaying everything that had happened, the letter, the park, the truth, the conversation. It all felt real now, no longer a mystery, just a story that had finally found its voice. I used to think knowing the truth would change everything overnight, but it didn't. It didn't erase the past. It didn't undo the years. What it did instead was quieter, but far more powerful. It gave me clarity, and with clarity comes something unexpected: freedom. Freedom from the what-ifs, freedom from the doubts that once lived in the background of my life. For the first time, I wasn't questioning my past, I was understanding it. The question I had been carrying finally stood in front of me clearly. What do you do when someone hurts you because they were afraid to lose you? Do you hold on to the pain, or do you choose to grow beyond it? I realized forgiveness wasn't about saying what happened was okay. It was about saying, I refuse to let what happened control who I become. And that realization changed everything. When I saw them again, there were no dramatic words, just honesty. I can't change the past, I said, but I can choose how it shapes my future. They nodded, eyes filled with emotion. Not because everything was perfect, but because something was finally understood. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Not because the story was simple, but because it was finally complete. If this story meant something to you, subscribe and stay with me for more journeys like this, because sometimes the stories we hear help us understand our own. As I walked away that day, I realized something important. The letter didn't just bring me the truth, it brought me back to myself. Because at the end of the day, life isn't about the secrets we discover, it's about the person we choose to become after discovering them. And for the first time in years, I wasn't walking away from the past, I was walking forward with understanding. Some stories end with answers, others end with acceptance, but the most powerful endings are the ones that quietly become new beginnings. And this was mine.